Hi, my name is Karina Akido. I'm the managing editor of Canadian Auto Dealer, and I'm here with two important people today. I've got Al MacPhee, well-known dealer in Nova Scotia, past chairman of CADA as well, and I've got Ron Zima from GoGreen Communications. Now, today's conversation is going to go a little bit around the idea of idle time and the importance of connecting with drivers about why idle time needs to be reduced. So Al or Ron, maybe one of you can jump in and just speak to the importance of it and explain what initiatives are coming out of this. Al, what you're getting involved in, what you've been involved in that has to do with idle time.
Well, Ron's the grandfather for Idle Free and GoGreen and Communications. However, I joined them probably in 2010 for the first time. My son, Andrew, recognized that when he was picking his children up at hockey or preschool, the vehicles were all there idling in the winter time, and the little children are walking by and taking all these fumes into their little lungs. And we saw how ridiculous that is, not to mention that it's wasting a lot of fuel, burns the engine down quicker than it should. It's just, if there's a way we could reduce that. Now, obviously, there might be a time when vehicles the weather is extremely cold. You might need to keep the heat on by times, but most times people leave their vehicle idling till it's beyond the comfort zone. And for instance, even in the morning, in a cold Canadian morning, just leave your heavier clothing on, you put your car, it heats up within 2 minutes or so. If everybody in a many-story apartment building ran their car till they were comfortable, probably leave it for 10-15 minutes. One, great waste of fuel, tremendous lot of oxides in the air that is totally unnecessary, and that's not what the car and the engine were designed to do. Over.
Yeah, and I would jump in there, Karina, and say that I used to be a Canadian idler myself. So this is going back probably to the late 1990s that I used to have my remote start. I was like every other Canadian, generally speaking, because all you have to do is take a look around Toronto or Halifax and you can just see all the unconscious idling happening and people aren't bad people for doing that. They're just not aware of what the impact is. And what we found is that, and what I found early on was, oh my goodness, my kids were in elementary school at the time. And similarly with Al, he really got involved. I think the light bulb went off when we did our first idle-free school launch at his grandkids' school in Dartmouth. And you could really sense that the light bulb went off. We understood that there's just a lot of, greenhouse gas, loss of the family budget. And this is something that Al knows really well. It's damaging the vehicle. Idle in most vehicles today, whether they're work trucks or personal vehicles, idle. Al, would you concur with this? Idle is probably the least favorable operating condition for that vehicle.
Well, it's certainly not the most favorable, and it's one of the conditions on older ones that was very quite detrimental, but yeah, they might have become a little better. But idling is not the most comfortable way for engines to run. They're intended to work,
right?
Not stand idle.
They're engineered to drive. Today's vehicles are engineered to drive, to be driven, not idled. But Karina, just to wrap up on my previous thought, I was that parent who had elementary school kids some 20 years ago, and my idle time was about 280 hours per year, which I've documented in my e-learning program. So I was green on everything else except idle. So for most Canadians and Americans, it's still an invisible issue. And what Al has done with his leadership and with his optics and his support of this cause, he's really elevated it and put it in in the media over the past 10 years and in a lot of different ways. So we're really grateful for his involvement.
In the same vein, manufacturers have in recent times spent an absolute fortune to get stop, start, So when you go to come up to the stoplights or whatever, your vehicle does shut down. And this is wonderful, but it's going to take, for the 25 million vehicles that are on the road, it's going to take a very long time for that car park, that whole, to be converted to stop start. In the meantime, the obligation is going to be on the operator to do exactly what is best for everybody concerned. Ron mentioned your budget, the wear and tear of your vehicle, and of course the environment.
So let's kind of jump in here. I know I've got a lot of idlers in the parking lot behind my condo, so this is great information for not just dealers but everyone in general. Ron, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about the initiative, and Al, about your involvement in it, what you've been doing.
Yeah, well, Corinna, this started off as a grassroots campaign at my kids' elementary school on the outskirts of Halifax back in 2006. And I just did some numbers, did some Google searching back in about 2005. And this was when I was still running my vehicle out in my parking, out in my driveway for 20 minutes in the morning, even when it was like 5 degrees above Celsius, or it was just a couple degrees below. I would generally, before I would leave, run my vehicle 10 to 15 minutes. Now, you gotta remember, I was super environmentally sensitive on everything else back in 2005, but idling was totally invisible to me. And then I did the research and I found that Canadians and Americans are spending, and this is based on US Department of Energy research, about 6.6 billion gallons of fuel annually in the US and Canada, running their vehicles when not in motion. And they're not doing it on purpose. They're really good people. And so all we have to do is get this type of messaging. The grassroots campaign that we started at my kids' school evolved. It got better and better. We then had fleet operators asking us, can you put together a program? We did that. We had some remarkable achievements and results with that. And now we've evolved to an e-learning program with some key elements shot at MacPhee Ford, which really just clobbers the idle myths, talks about the metrics, talks about your kids, cars, and cash, and it's transformative. And we're getting some really amazing results with it. So that's the initiative. Al, do you want to talk about?
I might add, it's grown. There are coach fleets that are looking at it. We all have by chance traveled to conventions, and coaches will run all day long while we go back to them, and needlessly. And this is big money, but not only that, it's very detrimental to the environment. And so now some of the coach lines are looking for the training. They'd be the big fish, I would think, in terms of, but in comparison, there are a certain number of the transport of vehicles that are operating in Canada. There's so many more of the 25 million are being operated by individuals who have no concept that life would be much better for they and for all others if they just didn't stand their vehicle idling in the summer to cool it down, idling in the winter to keep it warm. And we're creatures of habit. It's very simple to push the remote and let it run, and then forget that it's even running sometimes, and go, oh goodness, it's ran its term, and let it do it again. We just do that. Where Ron mentioned they aren't bad people, but what they're doing isn't a good practice.
Perhaps the biggest myth out there that's costing billions of gallons of fuel across the US and Canada from driver unconscious idling behavior, Corinna, is restarts are bad. That is the biggest one by far for us guys to get over. And the fact of the matter is, and you'll see this in my e-learning, and by the way, you can check out some of the lessons on our Facebook page, Idle Free for Our Kids. But it's just an enormous opportunity. It's a problem, but it's an enormous opportunity to save a lot of fuel, a lot of downstream costs. We're working with a lot of fleet operators in the US right now. and a lot of carbon and a lot of exhaust pollution, all at the flick of a key. But it's that behavioral modification that really transforms drivers. And at the heart of that initiative is the three values that we talk about, that Al is exhibit A for, and that's our kids, cars, and cash. And when we find out what idling does to each one of those things that we really care about, it's transformative.
And the myth that it's hard on the starter to restart the car so many times, well, it's no more than a myth, because now what they're creating is a stop-start engine, and that starter must engage, I can't tell you how many times in a 20,000 kilometer span, because they are stopping at each stop sign. So it's we're only talking about shutting it down when you're going to have a period of stand time, not necessarily in the drive-through. No, that's not the place you do it. But if you do go to the drive-through and you see the young folks and they drive over in the parking lot and they leave their engine running all the time while they're having their meal, it's not necessary then.
What about families that are trying to warm up their cars? Let's say they go pick up their children at school. So, I mean, that's probably where the issue is that you notice at the elementary schools. The argument that they may have could be, well, we're warming up the car, it's minus 30 or even colder. You know, we can't let our kids come into a really cold car. What would you say to that?
Great comment. And that does take place by times, but automobiles stay warm for a period of time. You've driven to the school and you have to wait maybe 8-12 minutes, and there's 60 people lined up, or whatever number it might be. If they were all shut down, it would be a lot less fumes going up in the air and offensive oxides. So the truth of the matter is, the cars aren't that, the windows are closed and it's cold, and that isn't the case throughout the year. There are many days. I don't know how many days are minus 19 or whatever, or minus 20 degrees, but not that many. Nonetheless, even those days, your car wouldn't become frigid in a matter of being shut down for 6 minutes or 10 minutes. Okay, over.
Yeah, and Corinna, all you have to do is look around your town or city and just take a look. It's difficult sometimes to really determine if that person really is idling, because they've cleaned up the emissions so well. Because 20, 30 years ago, there wasn't the type of emissions controls that we have now. However, even the latest model 2022, if you were to sit that vehicle, I don't care what kind of vehicle it is, and you had it in a MacPhee Ford service bay running, they of course have to put the extended exhaust pipe to exhaust the fumes out of the garage. Even a 2022 puts out a lot of, it's horrendous, the amount of CO2 that comes out of a vehicle's tailpipe as it idles. And it's also all of those other pollutants that Al has referred to. But the point of the matter is that the vast majority of the market in North America right now are internal combustion engine driven, and the vast majority, just look around your town or city or Toronto and see how many people are parked, not in motion, either on their phone, doing something else. And Al and I would both concur, and we said this over the years, that 80 to 90% of your Canadian idling could be eliminated. It's an enormous amount. And I'm proof positive of that, because I'll tell you, I had 280 engine hours per year, which I document in my learning in a very scientific process, that, that's what my habit amounted to, right? So you can imagine, you take that across the marketplace, it's a big number.
It would be self-serving for me to say, let them idle. The engines wear out quicker, the car has to be traded more often, and so on. But there's a bigger issue here. And, climate change is a fact of life. And we think that the internal combustion engine, which they're going to spend a fortune in time to get rid of it, what we can do in the intro, and it'll be a long time before the fleet is converted, is to do the right thing with our current car right now.
Well, in that case, I have one last question for you, for both of you. So you've offered a lot of good information. Now, do you have any additional advice or tips for dealers that want to tackle this issue with the people coming, the consumers coming in to purchase vehicles?
Well, the dealers are independent business people and working for manufacturing with franchises from manufacturers. I would have, I would encourage them to listen, to look at this from the perspective that I'm thinking at this moment in time. But I defer to Ron because if he's done a conversion on me, see what he might offer for the other thousands of dealers.
So what I would do as a main resource is something I would point to, Corinna, and I don't have that link right with me right now, but you can find it online readily enough. Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which is part of the US Department of Energy system of very large pieces of research laboratories scattered around the US, did a study, I think this was about 2016, where they took a large cross section of the OEMs, Ford, GM, you name it, virtually, well, not all of them, but close to being so many of the majority of vehicle types. And they did an assimilation of all these operator manuals of what it specifically says about idling. And you can see this report, and virtually every one of these original equipment manufacturers says, please don't idle our vehicle or our technology. So what I would say to dealers is take a look at that study. And when you're make it part of your process for onboarding new clients or getting them ready in their new vehicles, and point to because invariably that manual is going to say, don't idle this technology. It's not meant for, 60 seconds is best. And so that's the key tip that I could give to dealers right now to use right now.
Great. Well, thank you, both of you, so much for taking the time to do this interview. A lot of great information. I'm sure dealers are listening in. And with that, I wish you both good health and safety along with your families during this period. And good luck with the initiative. Let's hope it spreads throughout all of Canada.
And clean air.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Corinna.
Thank you. Thank you.